Okay, now we have all the major elements put in the song. We can start to shape the transitions, the build up, the breakdown, that kind of thing. So first, I think we can start with the let's start with the breakdown and the build up, the most important part. So building tension obviously is like the most important part of a song, especially like a dance floor oriented song. It's the key to really making it playable, making people pull out their hair during the breakdown and the build up and then just go crazy in the drop. So it's really important that you nail this in your songs. One of the easiest things to do for like tension and for build up is white noise. Obviously, it's like very overused, but it works really well, so I'm not ashamed. So if we're gonna just bring in this standard long noise ramp, but because white noise is so overused and can be pretty tiring, we're gonna try to spice it up a little bit. So what I like to do is add a phaser to mine. My go-to is Soundtoys Phase Mistress. You could probably use the Ableton phaser as well. I just know this a lot better. So we want it to be like a really slow one that just kind of moves. It just like moves like a filter around, which kind of adds some interest to it and just mixes it up a little bit. So I'm gonna go with this one to start, and you'll hear what it's. So it's a little extreme. And rather than it just be random, we're gonna step it to a rhythm, sync it, and have it over, let's say, 8 bars. And we're gonna have it a ramp up. So it's basically just slowly. Like that. Makes it a lot more exciting. Let's automate the actual mix on it. And we can even automate the resonance too, so it gets a little more extreme as it gets to the top. Then bring it back down. We're going to want some reverb on this as well. Just use Ableton for this, I guess. So without the phaser, so it just kind of turns the noise into like a riser almost. I did 8 bars, and you can see that just the way the song is structured, by the time it's about to drop, the modulation's at the peak. Sometimes, depending on how you arrange it, that might not be the case, so you can either change the phase of it, which I don't even know if you can do in this plugin, but instead you could just change the length so it gets to be the peak of the modulation when you're about to drop. What else can we do to make it pretty crazy? We could put auto pan on it. I'm gonna put the reverb after the phaser and then the pan after the reverb. So for this, we can have it start off being like a slow, very subtle panning, and then bring the amount up, and then right back down right before the drop. Oh, we're doing the rate actually. Well, that works too. So we want to automate both. And then the amount as well. Let's pull these out. And the reason I'm coming back to 0 right before the drop is so it goes really crazy and then sort of focuses back in right before, which is just a cool trick for your ears. So let's see how that sounds. Yeah, so I think that's pretty cool. And then last but not least, we can automate LFO tool, and I'm using LFO tool rather than the sidechain because I'm going to want to just easily be able to change the depth because we don't want it to be pumping the whole time. I'd say we could make it start out not pumping at all and then slowly get more and more because there's no drums happening right here. So we kind of want something to like put you back on beat. So that's cool. So, you know, just adding a couple plugins, not doing anything crazy, but we're really transforming this generic white noise into something a little more special. You know, it's just a way to not get complacent and just slap a sample in there. So that's sort of a good build up, but what about the actual drop? We probably want to release that tension. So I have another sample here. Quick noise fall. This, probably don't want it as loud. In fact, we need to turn this down in general. Let's do it here. Anytime the audio is like getting close to the clipping, I'll just lower it here rather than in the mixer. That way I just have more headroom to add plugins in case they make it louder. Let's call this noise sweeps. So I like that, but I honestly kind of want to just keep it super high end and almost make it like a part of the drums for at least the first couple bars. And then maybe here we unloop it and fade it back out. Oops. So let's see how that sounds. And this we're going to want to have pumping more. So not right away. We started off with like a blast, and then as the track moves, it starts to pump. And then maybe we have it trail back off. So it's just this little automation that just makes it more natural. It makes it have some movement, and it just seems like something's actually changing rather than just a sample being thrown on there. Okay, so I like that. I think we can make it twice as long. So as it's about to fade out when we go 8 bars through. Let's fade this. Yeah, I like that. Okay, and maybe as this fades out, we'll probably want something else to come in. I'm not sure what yet, but we can think about that later. Okay, so we've got some noise in here. It's pretty powerful, but maybe we can layer it with something else to make it even bigger, because this really is one of those tracks that has like a gigantic drop climax thing where you really want to build it up for that. So maybe we do this reverse cymbal. And EQ it. So I like that. Later on, once we get to like the return channels, we can probably place this in a reverb on an auxiliary channel, and that way it won't just be like immediately abrupt stop. It'll actually have some tail to it. Okay, so we have, I'd say, a pretty good handle for the breakdown or for the build up as far as the noise is concerned. What else can we do? We could do a drum roll. I think that's a good way to sort of tie together a build up. So you can definitely use samples for this. I'm gonna make it from scratch. Oops, we can need a MIDI channel. The reason I like to make it from scratch is I can control the panning of everything. I control like the velocity and just make it exactly how I need it rather than be stuck with a sample that's pretty straightforward, just ramp upwards. So let's go to our drum samples. Not your typical snare sounds. Trying to make this a little more special, something different. So I'm going to go with these two. And we're going to duplicate them so that we can hear the tails without having them like choked on each other. And we can actually change the pitch of both so it sounds like two separate drum hits on the same snare rather than the same drumstick hitting the same snare sounding exactly the same. So if we were to do that, there's multiple ways to do this. I think first, I'll just make them sound a little different, like 25 off maybe. We're going to bring these down a lot. And bring it down here too. Okay, so let's create the MIDI channel. Oops. So I like doing it this way because you can just get the full sustain of each hit rather than have to have it stop for the next hit, if that makes sense. Go here. Okay. Copy that and do it here too. Okay, this I just want for that top end. So let's actually bring it here. Take down the sustain. So it's kind of like the beads of a snare drum, but we can treat it separately, which is nice. Probably get even more extreme with that. Okay, and then another thing we can do is take this LFO, put it on a 16th note, which is the amount of our drums, put it on random, and then change the pitch maybe like 5%, the volume like, let's say 9, and the panning 10. And then we can make the random like 12. So now let's reduplicate that here. Maybe change this a little bit. Maybe less. So we've got slightly different settings on both. So you can tell the pitch is just changing a tiny little bit. You have to undo retrigger. That way it actually, the LFO just continues. So every 16th note, it just gets a different random step between these percentages. It's really subtle. Say if we crank it up. Yeah, so you just want it subtle, but it's just a way to make the drums a little more natural. And we'll actually do this a lot more later on, but start it off now. Okay, and now we can also do that velocity trick. Just copy these. Yeah, so we don't really need all that extra. So let's take it down on the envelope. Maybe not that extreme. And make slightly different settings. Okay, now we can add a drum roll reverb to it. Let's go super big because we're going to want it to really like wash out. But we can also just get experimental with it, like see what sounds weird, see what sounds different. That could be kind of cool. Is it like not like a natural reverb really, but bring it down a little bit. So let's automate that. Start off kind of low, bring it up a tiny bit, and then right towards the end we'll get higher. Yeah, so we can automate that too. Start it here. Maybe get it really crazy, like all the way up to here maybe. And then bring it right back down and focus it right before the drop. So it like turns back into a drum roll. Yeah. So I think that's pretty good. And then shoots back up for the tail. Okay. I also like the idea of automating the sustain. So let's try something. Let's make a macro and map this to that macro, and then the sustain of the other one to the macro as well. So this is the sustain of that snarey portion. So it just kind of adds that little crackle towards the end, which will sort of excite the reverb and make it have a little bit more of that like noisy quality. EQ a little bit of that out of there. Maybe tame the highs just a tiny bit. See how that sounds. Yeah, we might have gone too extreme with the velocity. Another thing I'm going to do is to help sort of manage that tension and that breakdown. I'm going to bring the volume down a little bit, or the gain on the master channel. Oops. So that way it's sort of inaudibly becomes quieter over time without you really noticing it. Maybe just 2 decibels, and then when it comes back, it's 2 decibels louder, and it makes the drops sound a lot bigger. Yeah, so you can barely notice it. Once we're limiting and compressing the master and like actually doing the mastering, it'll make a much bigger difference because it'll basically be taking the entire track down a little bit. But right now, because the levels are all lower, you can't really tell. But we'll see that later.